One day after, they executed Alfred Bourgeois. And the next person on their list is Lisa Montgomery. She would be the first woman the federal government will put to death after 70 years and will be the 11th person to be executed by the federal government since Donald Trump resumed the practice after a 17-year hiatus. Here is a picture of her as a child from a piece from NPR. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Lisa's life. Even before she was born, her mother, when she was pregnant with her, drank heavily. And that resulted in Lisa having permanent brain damage. And once Lisa was born, her mother abused her and her older sister, Diane. She would tape their mouths shut with duct tape. She would strike them with electrical cords. At one point, her mother killed their family dog with a shovel, forced her to watch as punishment. When Lisa was only 4 years old, she was forced to see her older sister be raped, her 8-year-old sister be raped by a male friend that would come over and visit and rape her older sister frequently. Now, Diane, that was the name of her older sister, eventually was able to get out of that household. Child services took her out of the household, but left Lisa behind. And things only got worse after that. After that, for the first time, she was raped by her stepfather when she was only 11 years old. And that continued throughout her teenage years. When she was 15 years old, her mother became complicit in this and would invite men over to rape her repeatedly in exchange for money, basically telling Lisa that she had to earn her keep in the household, and she needed to do that by withstanding rapes from men. Now, when Lisa was 17 years old, her mother forced her to be married to her stepbrother, who was a young adult. And her stepbrother continued this cycle of trauma and abuse by beating her, raping her, and filming all of it. And over the course of the next 5 years, she had 4 children. And then her mother and her stepbrother pressured her into becoming sterilized. So she was sterilized, and then she divorced from her stepbrother, remarried, and her stepbrother threatened to take custody of the children and to tell her new husband that she was sterile. Now, under all of these circumstances, all of this trauma, all these years of abuse, Lisa developed a whole host of mental illnesses that went undiagnosed and had a psychotic break. She, during this episode, killed a pregnant woman, Bobby Jo Stinnett, and took the baby home to care for herself. Lisa has since taken full responsibility for this crime, for this terrible tragedy. And something that is so important to think about and so important to recognize is that this tragedy, it can't be divorced from the trauma that was inflicted upon Lisa her entire life. And in fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that her older sister said. Her older sister was interviewed by Elle magazine and talked about how when she went to live with her new family, she never told them about what had happened to Lisa. And there's this one quote from that interview where she says, and I'm going to read it for you. She says, "I was only 8 years old when I left her. And I know there's not much I could have done, but it's impossible not to feel an overwhelming sense of guilt that maybe, just maybe, if I had spoken up all those years ago, Bobby Jo Stinnett would still be alive and my baby sister wouldn't be on death row." Now, of course, 8-year-old Diane could not have been expected to save her baby sister. But what if somebody, anybody, had intervened? What if anybody had saved her? And the thing is, there were so many opportunities for so many people, so many institutions that should have prevented this very sort of thing from happening to intervene and help her. Her school never helped her. The court system never helped her. Child welfare services never helped her. And I can't help but think that if any of these different institutions had stepped in, had stood up for her at any point, they would not have only saved Lisa Montgomery from this cycle of abuse, they also could have saved the life of Bobby Jo Stinnett. And by the way, when I say nobody stood up for her, I mean that even her own lawyers at trial didn't properly stand up for her. They failed to present the full extent of evidence showing her severe mental illness, the sustained torture, the rape and the abuse that she suffered, and how all of that led to her severe mental illness and ultimately led to this crime. And in fact, they decided to read a poem for their closing statement. Now, Lisa since then has been treated in prison. She's been getting psychiatric treatment. She has developed severe remorse for the crime. She's maintained a connection with her children, with her grandchildren. And what's really important to recognize is how much our society just failed her. This is a woman who, from being a child to being an adult, never had a real shot at a normal, happy, healthy life. And compounding all of that, our government wants to end her life, wants to kill her. But instead, our government should be working to save her. Donald Trump should be using the pardon power to commute Lisa Montgomery's sentence and give her a second chance. And the Supreme Court, for its part, should stay her execution and give her a shot at a new trial. Because a new trial would show the extent of her mental illness and the extent of how all of her trauma contributed to it. But most of all, we all have a chance to be somebody who stands up for Lisa Montgomery, because she hasn't had that throughout her life. And we can do that by calling our senators and members of Congress. I'm actually going to pull up a visual for you right now so you can take a picture of it. Go to www.usa.gov/elected-officials. And you can also call U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr at the Department of Justice. That number is 202-353-1555. Press option 9 and leave a message asking Attorney General Barr to not execute Lisa Montgomery. You know what? And in fact, because we're all in this together, and because every call counts, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that call. Because who am I to tell all of you to do that if I can't do it myself? So I'm dialing the number. That's 202-353-1555.
Department of Justice comment line.
Okay, I'll click 9.
Is valuable to us. Please leave your comment regarding the Department of Justice.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
Attorney General Barr, my name is Alana Sivan. I live in New York. I'm calling on behalf of Lisa Montgomery to ask that you do not execute her. Please commute her death sentence. She was tortured. She was raped. She was abused by her family for decades, and she does not deserve to be put to death. No one does. Have mercy. Give her a chance. Thank you. It's that easy. Make your voice heard. And the reason why I say that's really important, and I get for a lot of people, it's difficult to make these calls, myself included. They're just a little bit uncomfortable, I guess, is because I keep thinking about the executions that have happened over last week. And I keep thinking that maybe if more calls were made, maybe if more people spoke up earlier, we could have stopped them. And I know I don't want to feel that same way a few weeks from now. And I know that there are so many people right now who are fighting to stay this execution and to commute other death penalty sentences as well. There are some amazing people like Sister Prajan, Lisa's sister Diane, and other anti-death penalty advocates who are calling on President Trump and Attorney General Barr to halt the execution of Lisa Montgomery, and who are calling for the government to end the death penalty altogether. When we interviewed Sister Prajan last week, she said something really powerful, which was that nobody who has ever been executed in this country ever came from money. And that's something really powerful to think about, because I even think about the different circumstances with Lisa and her sister and how circumstances could have made all of the difference. This form of government is only, or excuse me, this form of punishment is only used against people who are poor, and it's disproportionately used against people of color and people living with mental illness. And so that's why people are fighting to end it all together. And actually, Representative Ayanna Pressley has proposed a bill that would abolish the use of the death penalty altogether. And she frequently points to how there's no humane way for a government to kill people. The only solution to the death penalty is to get rid of it. And so I hope that when this segment is over, or actually I kind of hope you pause it right now, to make that same call, to call for the government to not execute Lisa Montgomery and to not engage in the death penalty at all. Lisa is somebody who was born with brain damage. She was born into extreme poverty, into a family that raped and abused her for decades. And she, as a result of all this, developed a severe mental illness that she struggled with her whole life, that she still struggles with. And in the midst of a psychotic episode, she committed this crime, and the same system that is responsible for her mental illness, that is ultimately responsible for this tragedy, wants to kill her for it. Now, again, Trump ignored pleas for justice last week and beforehand. And so the next person who it looks like will be subject to his cruel punishment is going to be Lisa Montgomery, unless elected officials step in to do something. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on The Appeal Live. I'm Alana Sivan. Follow Appeal News on Facebook and The Appeal on Twitter for the latest news.